Mr. Burst immediately stroked his chin, trying to recall. I can't remember exactly, but on my way to your house, I received a plea from a boy. He reached out to me for help. The boy approached and called Mr. Burst back. The wizard was shocked to hear the boy's words. The boy's appearance seemed very familiar. Hearing this, everyone guessed who it was, right? It was Tespelin, and he spoke to the wizard in a serious tone. I have something to ask of you. That's how the story went. He said, please pass this on to Yuzniel. She held the gift in her hand and silently wondered who it could be from. Mr. Burst continued, explaining that the boy wanted to give it directly to her but couldn't at the moment, so he asked Faye to deliver it for him. A spark lit up in Yuzniel's eyes as she thought about someone. She quickly asked Mr. Burst, excuse me, sir, do you remember what his face looked like? Yuzniel eagerly continued, was he the one with blonde hair and gray eyes? Mr. Burst tilted his head back, trying to recall for a moment, then shook it disappointingly. I only remember the boy grabbing my hand. It's strange how I can't recall his face. At that moment, the boy approached me closely. Perhaps he used memory magic on me, so I can't remember anything. Tespelin looked mysterious then. He placed his hand in front of his lips as if signaling silence, then spoke in a low voice, you may be able to trust me. Yuzniel was stunned. Memory magic? How? Mr. Burst nodded, confirming that it was indeed a rather high level of magic. Yuzniel, upon hearing this, immediately rejected her earlier speculation that it was Tespelin. Then it wasn't him, was it? She continued, was there no other distinguishing feature? The wizard nodded. Yes, I remember in such weather, the other person was dressed very lightly, not suitable for this place at all, and he seemed frozen. And Mr. Burst still couldn't understand. What's strange is, although he smiled, it felt like he was crying in a peculiar way. This detail left Yuzniel bewildered. She didn't know who that person could be. Suddenly, Yuzniel hurriedly stepped outside, telling the wizard, I'm going out for a moment. The wizard wanted to stop her. What's wrong? It's snowing outside, you can't go out now. Wait, it's been quite a while. Even if you go out now, you may not find the boy. He tried to prevent her, but Yuzniel was determined to go out. Mr. Burst called after Yuzniel in frustration as she rushed away. Her footsteps sank deep into the snow as she hurriedly made her way. She was confused in her thoughts, because among those close to her, only he addressed me with such familiarity. Yuzniel's thoughts became clearer as she pondered, the person wearing thin clothing in this cold, waiting until their entire body froze just to give me a gift, can only be him. She stopped in the snowstorm, still holding the red gem given to her by him. Yuzniel quietly called Tespelin's name, it must be you, and no one else. Back in the present, Yuzniel maintained her belief, I want to believe it's you. She touched the glass door, feeling the cold of the falling snow outside. She remembered Tespelin's words from before, I have certainly thought of Yuzniel, to live. Yuzniel tightened her grip on the gemstone, looking through the window. She had guessed correctly, indeed, the person who gave her this gem was Tespelin. The more she looked at the gem, the more curious she became about its name. Even Faye Burst, seeing it for the first time, tried to analyze its composition at Colosseum but couldn't determine its type. Yuzniel caressed the gemstone, feeling as if her chest wanted to burst with joy at the sight of its bright red color. It was like Tespelin's plea, please don't forget me. Yuzniel knew that a gem of this size was undoubtedly immensely valuable. While Yuzniel was happily with her family, Tespelin was also there. Yuzniel hugged the gem tightly to her chest, feeling a pang of emotion. I wonder how Tespelin felt when he gave me this. The cold evening passed, and the next morning at the mansion of Count Harlan's steward, everyone in Yuzniel's family was having breakfast together. Gale cheerfully complimented the soup, saying it was delicious. Their mother smiled and said, if it's good, then eat plenty. However, Yuzniel seemed lost in thought, as if pondering something. She picked up her spoon, then put it down without taking a single bite. Her father, sitting across from her, quickly noticed that something was off with her today and asked, don't you have an appetite? His question startled Yuzniel out of her thoughts. She didn't want her father to worry, so she pretended everything was fine and replied, no, father, there's nothing to worry about. Hearing this only made her father feel more sympathetic towards her. He asked again, I've noticed lately you've been staying up late at Colosseum, is your research keeping you busy? Yuzniel nodded honestly, yes, father, it is. In the past 10 years, there have been frequent magical storms in the Empire, so there's a lot to investigate. Yuzniel continued to lament, if it weren't for preparing for the New Year's Eve ball tomorrow, I would have spent the whole night in the research room. Her worried father asked, again? His face didn't look too pleased at this point. He advised his daughter, you don't need to participate in that magic project right after starting school. His concern evident, he added, just sticking to the regular curriculum is difficult enough, let alone getting involved in projects. Mrs. Seal, seated beside him, gently advised her husband to stay calm. Seeing her parents worried, Yuzniel promised them, I'll do my best not to tarnish the family's reputation. Father, you know that studying history and culture with Faye Burst and then participating in the subsequent classes is not too much for me. Hearing this, her father became even more infuriated, what reputation? Why do you speak like that? Yuzniel's mother sighed, your father isn't worried about that, Yuzniel. We've also noticed that lately, even on weekends, you've been involved in high society events, so you can't rest properly. It turned out that the horse carriage had brought Yuzniel back home the day before. Upon arriving home, Lord Sunni said, goodbye, I'll come to pick you up next weekend. Yuzniel waved goodbye to Lord Sunni's carriage until it disappeared from sight. Her hands, thin and frail, rose up in the chilly night mist, gradually stiffening. As soon as the carriage left, Yuzniel withdrew her hand and sighed deeply. She seemed quite tired, murmuring to herself, he's back, and I still have to adjust my research report. Seeing their daughter in such a state, Yuzniel's parents felt deeply sorry for her. Their anger stemmed from worrying about her, afraid that she might be overworking herself. While Yuzniel wanted to reassure them, Nai Milan had returned to politics and taken over the role of overseeing internal affairs. Therefore, they believed that if she could grasp the trends of the wealthy society, it would be beneficial. Even if something similar to what happened 14 years ago occurred again, they would be better equipped to handle it. Her parents gently reassured her, you don't have to struggle alone. We're a family, after all. Finally, Yuzniel's face brightened again, and she smiled, acknowledging, that's right, we're a family. They laughed and spoke affectionately with each other. Yuzniel didn't reveal these thoughts to her parents, she wanted to be prepared so that when the time came, she could leave without worrying about anyone. She had almost grown accustomed to this place, and sometimes wondered if it was necessary to return to the world she came from. But she was still tormented by the nightmare from 20 years ago, making it difficult for her to forget. The memory remained vivid in her mind, echoing her mother's plea, don't leave me behind, which seemed to resound in her ears every day. Her current mother was always concerned about Yuzniel. Mrs. Seal's face bore a tinge of sadness as she asked, have you been dreaming of the nightmares lately? Yuzniel's father, upon hearing this, couldn't contain his calmness and stood up abruptly. What? If that's the case, then we need to see a doctor right away. Her younger sister also showed concern and asked, nightmares? Are you okay? Yuzniel gently stroked her sister's head to reassure her. No, not at all. Ever since I grew up, I haven't had nightmares anymore. The research institute at Coliseum is manageable, so please don't worry. Hearing Yuzniel's words, her father was somewhat relieved, but still insisted, all right, if you're sick, you must tell us. Yuzniel's mother sat beside them, deep in thought, saying nothing. Suddenly, Yuzniel spoke up, and her mother, pleased with her participation in society, was slightly startled. She quickly provided reasons to justify herself. Yes, meeting many people is necessary to find a good life partner, isn't it? Yuzniel glanced over at his younger sister, asking why she looked like that. His sister promptly reminded him, do you remember last winter when you went shopping at the Baron Boat Market with me? Back then, you helped a certain young man. She thought that was the ideal image of her older sister. Before her, a person was falling, and Yuzniel came to help them, are you all right? The person stood up, brushed off the snow on them, and thanked Yuzniel for the help. Yuzniel was still worried, asking, are you hurt anywhere? Because I saw you fall pretty hard earlier. The passers-by accidentally bumped into you, but they just walked away. Only Yuzniel passing by helped the young man brush the snow off his hair and laughed, ha ha, it's okay, sincerely saying, thanks to you, I'm alive. Yuzniel suddenly remembered someone she secretly thought of, Tespelin, is that you? But the young man introduced himself as Miel, then shook Yuzniel's hand. Can I invite you for tea to thank you? Yuzniel reassured herself, stay alert, it can't be Tespelin. So, she quickly declined, no need, I have things to do. The young man didn't insist and quickly left. Oh, that's a pity. Next time we meet, I'll invite you for tea. He waved goodbye to Yuzniel. I'll go first. Yuzniel kept watching Meal's departing figure and Gale's curiosity about the person her sister just helped. Back at the meal, the younger sister continued, do you remember, you stared at that person from behind for a long time, so I thought it was your interest. Yuzniel shook her head. Oh, that's not it, she thought to herself, because at that moment, Yuzniel was thinking of Tespelin, so it seemed like that. Their appearances were somewhat similar, so she mistook him. Mrs. Seal then asked, what, the person's name is Meal? If it ends with L, it could be a fairy like us. Gale excitedly asked, other than our family, I've never met any other fairies before, it's so magical. Seeing this, Yuzniel's mother joked with her, all male fairies are handsome, just looking at them makes you happy. Gale listened with great interest, wow, really beautiful? Both mother and daughter laughed happily. Let's save that answer for when it's just the two of us. This made Yuzniel's father sitting next to them jealous and annoyed, how can he do that? Mrs. Seal quickly said, I'm just kidding, so don't be angry. Yuzniel, seeing the cheerful atmosphere of her family, felt a bit melancholic, thinking, Mom. What I want to do is find a way back quickly, not just because of nightmares, but because the longer I stay here, witnessing every moment of our family, the less confident I am to leave you all. Because everyone always stays by each other's side, encouraging and loving each other. The warm evening had passed after dinner with the family. At nightfall, Yuzniel's father sat alone in the study, lost in thought about many things, including today's events and those from the past. Yuzniel's mother appeared, her hand gently touching her husband's face. Why the long face? Are you worried about something? Since this evening, I've noticed you've been silent. The father quickly reassured his wife, you're overthinking, there's nothing wrong. Yuzniel's mother knew exactly what was on her husband's mind. She sat beside him, wanting to use her beauty to alleviate his sadness, to bring him some peace of mind. In this tender moment, Mrs. Seal looked into her husband's eyes, stroked his cheek, but I know, you only have me. She gently kissed his cheek affectionately. Mr. Milan leaned into his wife, you know my heart. His eyes seemed to want to convey something. Finally, he shared his worries with his wife. He thought of Yuzniel having nightmares since she was young, hearing her cries from her room every night, which would make Yuzniel's parents rush to her side and panic. In her dreams, Yuzniel always called out, Mom. It hurts so much, save me. Her nightly cries terrified and moved her parents. Mrs. Seal always rushed to embrace her daughter, Mom's here, while her husband quickly called for family members, quick, call the doctor. Come here. The mother quickly placed her hand on her daughter's face, calm down, my girl, it's okay. Everything's fine. Yuzniel sobbed, I don't want to die in that dream, making Yuzniel's parents even more worried and fearful. Currently, despite the romantic atmosphere between the two, the father sighed deeply, you also remember how serious that matter was. Yuzniel's mother remained silent for a while, then laid her hand on the bed, nodding to her husband, how could we forget? The two confided in each other, such a tender child experiencing such a dreadful nightmare. Do you see how our daughter understands things? Whenever she wakes up, she always comforts us. The mother looked at a picture of her daughter on the bedside table, because Yuzniel didn't want them to worry, but knowing that only made her worry even more because she couldn't be sure everything was truly all right. Before, when the crown prince ascended to the throne, our family couldn't return to how it was immediately. Do you remember Yuzniel being melancholic for a long time, as if she was dealing with something difficult to talk about? The father nodded, Bernard suggested that to us. While still in Varan, one day Bernard came to visit, saying to Seal, I heard Yuzniel is very sad, is that true? Bernard's words startled Yuzniel's mother, so she asked, did Yuzniel really say that? But Yuzniel's reaction was completely opposite, seeming very happy. Her mother realized that Yuzniel had been hiding her emotions, and finally seemed to express them, which is why she was genuinely happy. Yuzniel's mother truly hoped that Yuzniel was now more comfortable, but she still felt that Yuzniel going to the capital to work and creating distance from them was like she was running away from something in the future, the mother said solemnly. If only the girl could stay in Varan, that would be so much better. Why come back here? Mr. Milan consoled her, Seal, don't think like that, Yuzniel's mother quickly held his hand. Milan, we must prevent Yuzniel from getting too deeply involved in the royal family, otherwise, Yuzniel will be in danger. Yuzniel's mother believed that she needed someone willing to stand by her, becoming Yuzniel's source of strength to prepare for the upcoming tasks. It wasn't the lofty emperor, but rather a man ready to give up everything for our Yuzniel. Yuzniel's father found this suggestion reasonable as well. While early engagement would be good, it seemed that our Yuzniel hadn't considered this yet. He hugged his wife, encouraging her, "Don't worry, Seal. Because I'm human, I can't fully understand all of your recent worries in the palace, but things have been quite peaceful on the lower side, and Yuzniel has adapted very well to it, so everything will be fine. You should stop worrying so much." A few days later, it was the day of the New Year's Masquerade Festival, and everyone was excitedly attending. Wow! It's so much fun. Oh, there are so many people. Yuzniel's mother looked stunning when she arrived. She observed the surroundings. It seemed like everyone was excited for the new year. It appeared that people were paying a lot of attention to the costumes as well. At this moment, someone stepped out of a carriage. Indeed, the main character of the day was still Yuzniel, the most beautiful without a doubt. Yuzniel looked like a fairy in that dress. She didn't forget to wear the red gemstone pin chosen by her sister Gale, shining brilliantly. Yuzniel asked her mother, "Why am I the main character today?" Her mother smiled and replied, "Because it's your birthday today." Yuzniel helplessly smiled. Gale also said it's because of my birthday that she went through so much trouble to choose this dress for me. When I left, she was waiting at home, so I'll go back early. The mother was deeply moved. My Yuzniel is truly a wonderful sister. She hugged Yuzniel, making her blush. Oh, Mom, but her mother continued unabated, "My kind-hearted daughter." Yuzniel also praised her mother's dress today, which was equally dazzling. At this moment, her mother proudly told her, "Your father has decided to attend the banquet." Yuzniel was somewhat surprised, wondering why he cared about the masquerade festival. While the mother and daughter were talking, Yuzniel's father approached and called them. "Seal, Yuzniel." Yuzniel's father appeared, looking very elegant, waving to the two women, "Have you been waiting long?" He quickly noticed the splendor of his daughter and wife, praising them, "Who look so beautiful." They kept praising each other endlessly. Standing in the middle, Yuzniel felt like her parents didn't see her at all, so she exclaimed, "Are you punishing me today?" The Harland family made everyone dazzled by their splendor. The radiance from those beautiful creatures made it hard for people to look away. But it seemed like the Harland family didn't notice that and didn't care about people's glances. Yuzniel's father continued the conversation, "How could I miss this? Today is the first masquerade festival since you entered the capital, so I have to be concerned." Yuzniel rolled her eyes, "Mom, you two are really in sync today." Her mother smiled satisfied, "Really? Are you jealous? Then you should get married too," her mother teased her, "Aren't there two suitable men around you?" This made Yuzniel feel a bit embarrassed. "How do you feel, don't you like those two?" Her mother's questions made her blush. Her mother complained, "My daughter, you're really picky." Yuzniel chuckled bitterly, "I don't even know about that." Yuzniel's father stood beside them and called out, "Let's go inside." Yuzniel smirked, thinking, "Well, isn't it because of you? After all, when someone is preparing to leave, don't they need a fiancé?" The party inside had begun, everyone was laughing and chatting happily, many people came to greet Yuzniel's family. "Duchess Harland, you haven't changed at all from 14 years ago, have you?" Seal's mother modestly smiled at those compliments, "You praise me too much, because I'm just a fairy." Yuzniel stood beside her, feeling that socializing among the nobility was still an unending process, and she knew her mother had only recently been in contact with the upper class, so her mother had to make quite an effort. If it were a normal day, Mother would have left you all behind," Yuzniel said. Yuzniel felt a bit hesitant coming here. It had been a while since she returned, so she looked around curiously, deciding, I should also go inside. The past still lingered here, even though the last time Yuzniel walked alone in the castle was a long time ago, visiting this banquet hall. It didn't seem much different from then. As Yuzniel was walking, she noticed that a painting on the wall had been covered. She suspected and stopped, muttering, there used to be a painting here? But why is it covered by a black cloth? Yuzniel used her hand to uncover the cloth, and she was startled to see that this painting depicted the founding of Jogan, a story Yuzniel had only heard about through tales. Today, Yuzniel had seen this painting with her own eyes. The painting depicted the emperor signing a covenant with a great deity to obtain all the knowledge of this world and become a demon knight. It was a reenactment of the story of creation, the kingdom in the Northern Empire at that time, and Yuzniel's eyes widened. She was startled, remembering that the deity was described in white, while the intimidating black figure stood out. What was this all about? Yuzniel stared at the painting, feeling a chill run down her spine. She was immersed in thought when suddenly someone called her from behind. Startled, she approached and recognized the familiar figure of Ather. He looked handsome like the others, and he cheerfully asked about her birthday, wondering why she was standing alone in a corner. Yuzniel turned back and smiled when Ather wished her a happy birthday. Ather understood his friend and sighed, asking why no one else was with her. Yuzniel nodded in agreement and explained that her family was in the central hall. Hearing Yuzniel's words, Ather asked why she was alone, seemingly implying that there was no one with her. At that moment, someone approached Yuzniel and Ather. Eugene stepped forward and called out, "Master," her words cut through Ather's question, making him awkward. Eugene happily wished Yuzniel a happy birthday. Yuzniel awkwardly smiled and thanked her. Ather, feeling cut off, looked at Eugene with reproach. Miss Eugene winked at Master Ather. "Do you know when His Majesty arrives, the banquet will start immediately, and leaving the Duke's seat empty is not allowed." They argued in front of Yuzniel. "That's all there is to it, it startled me." "What are you saying? When did I do that? I was just looking for you, I didn't do anything." They continued to argue, causing our protagonist to feel a headache. "Alright, stop arguing." Yuzniel sighed, "Why can't you two get along? Every time you meet, you end up arguing fiercely." Yuzniel had to raise her hand between the two to prevent the argument from becoming more dramatic. "Come on, let's all go back to the center," she reassured, pushing the couple forward. Ather frowned. "Yuzniel, don't push me." Yuzniel laughed, "I wouldn't have to push you if you two would just stop here." Yuzniel moved away, still thinking about the painting, but still couldn't explain it. Who was the figure next to the deity? Back at the party, Yuzniel stood still, intending to complete this masquerade in as peaceful a manner as possible, but that was just Yuzniel's thought. Now, Yuzniel had to face the storm of showbiz. The debate between the three men was ongoing, with Yuzniel's father sternly reminding her about the first dance, both she and her mother, "Do you remember?" But alongside that, Ather argued that Yuzniel also had the right to dance with her peers, and Master Sunni felt the same way. If the first dance is with her father, it will turn into the worst birthday. The fiery debate between the three continued. There was no end in sight, and the father became angry. "It's been a long time since we had a banquet, don't interfere in other people's family relationships." But Ather argued, "I'm Yuzniel's friend," while Eugene said she was her partner in the upper class. Their responses overwhelmed Yuzniel's father, and Yuzniel standing by felt awkward. From the beginning, Yuzniel had no intention of dancing, but everyone seemed to be stirring things up for her. Yuzniel's words seemed to vanish like the wind blowing away the clouds. They didn't even bother to listen to her. The three of them continued their argument, and Yuzniel's mother, seeing this, stepped beside her, teasingly saying, "My daughter is famous indeed." Yuzniel helplessly retorted, "Mother, here we go again. Isn't it because of your words?" Her mother covered her mouth and forehead, pretending innocence. "What do you mean?" It turns out, a few minutes ago, the three of them were greeting each other, laughing and talking. "Hello, Mr. Hardlard, it's been a while," Master Ather said. Standing by her mother, Yuzniel asked, "Isn't this an interesting tradition on every New Year's occasion, Yuzniel?" Contrary to her mother, Yuzniel didn't care much about this, seeing her indifference. Her mother continued, "Because according to oral tradition, after becoming an adult and dancing the first dance at the New Year's masquerade, love will begin to blossom between the two." Yuzniel turned to Seal and said, "I find that tradition quite unfounded." Her mother smiled mysteriously, "Well, who knows? I'm not sure either." Unexpectedly, her mother suddenly raised her voice, attracting the attention of the three men on the other side. "So, my daughter, who will you dance the first dance with?" Yuzniel looked bewildered, clearly thrown into such a festive atmosphere. And now, watching the three arguing on the other side, Yuzniel sighed, "Mother, do you see what's happening? Because of you, the situation over there is even more tense now." The three continued their debate, with no one willing to give in. The girl had to dance the first dance with her father. "You can't dance with both of us," Ather and Lord Nudd objected. "That's not possible." At this point, our protagonist exclaimed, "Mother, look, our father is outnumbered." They were arguing back and forth. "You have to give Yuzniel freedom," Lord Nudd said. "Yes, let us take responsibility," they retorted. These words left Yuzniel's father at a loss for how to respond, but he seemed to be waiting for help from his wife, Seal. Yuzniel shook her head in frustration. "Mother, please come and rescue father." Yuzniel's father almost cried out for help from his wife, silently pleading, "My dear, can you help me?" Yuzniel spoke timidly to her mother, "Even if you ask for mother's help, father still loves me more than anyone else, right?" Yuzniel's mother placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder. "That's right," she said, then pushed her forward towards her father, allowing her daughter to hold her father's hand tightly, smiling, "So let your father take charge of your first dance." In Yuzniel's emotional moment, this scene made the two gentlemen furious, to the point of being unbelievable. Yuzniel's mother rubbed her back, not forgetting to advise the two men behind her, "There's nothing to change, you two just give up." The power struggle between the two young men, or rather, the fight for affection, ended with the main girl's choice, being no one. Yuzniel looked at Seal with suspicion and asked, "Why did you do that?" "I thought you would advise me to dance with either Nud or Ather." Her mother didn't say anything, her face slightly melancholic. She couldn't tell her daughter about the worries of her and her husband, she could only think of the most humorous way to explain it, as she sensed the unease of a fairy. Only today did she realize how terrifying the atmosphere in the palace had become. She silently worried, "I know the atmosphere here is as gloomy as it envelopes everything around, but it's too different from before, not like it used to be." "Mother," Yuzniel called her, realizing something similar at this moment. "Mother." The repeated call made Seal startle out of her wandering thoughts. Yuzniel looked at her mother's deeply worried expression, concerned. "Mother, are you all right? Is something wrong?" Seal was still thinking about the gloomy atmosphere surrounding the castle. Yuzniel called her mother again. "Mother. Why aren't you answering me?" Yuzniel's mother made her decision. She quickly took her daughter's hand. "Yuzniel, let's go home quickly today." Yuzniel was very surprised. "Wasn't it just a moment ago that she wanted me to dance with my father?" Yuzniel's father also seemed puzzled. "My dear, what's going on?" Only the mother knew, because this was not just a frightening atmosphere, it was so powerful and overwhelming, it felt like it wanted to grab Yuzniel. Suddenly, before her unanswered question, a familiar figure with black hair, wearing a cloak, approached. Everyone in the room looked up, hurriedly recognizing the emperor. Yuzniel's mother's face showed clear astonishment. The familiar figure was none other than Tespelin, with his black eyes and black hair, exuding a cool aura, appearing before everyone. At that moment, Yuzniel's gaze stared at him, slightly expectant, silently thinking, "Tespelin. It's been a long time since I last saw you." Different from her mother, the girl didn't perceive the ominous magic currently dominating this place as something potentially harmful. Because she knew it originated from this handsome emperor. Yuzniel keenly noticed that he seemed thinner than the last time they met, but Tespelin's face now appeared even colder than before. Tespelin also directed his gaze towards Yuzniel, causing her to shyly avert her eyes from his intense gaze. Yet, her cheeks couldn't help but flush, silently thinking, "He's just like before." Yuzniel's mother, seeing her daughter's reaction, became worried and called out, "Yuzniel." Then, she tightly held Yuzniel's hand, trembling, and admonished, "Today, you must stay by our side, remember?" Yuzniel found her mother's instructions very suspicious. At that moment, her mother wore a face full of fear and unease, staring fixedly at Tespelin. She continued to remind her daughter not to separate from her parents. Mrs. Seal stepped forward, gripping Yuzniel's hand tightly with tension. This puzzled Yuzniel, because the person in front of her was Tespelin. And Tess to her was not something to be feared like this. Tespelin descended the stairs, calmly and silently, his gaze sweeping over everyone around, all of whom were chanting, "The Emperor has arrived." The crowd dispersed to make way for the Emperor. Only Yuzniel and Mrs. Seal remained still at the feast. At this point, Yuzniel turned to look at her mother, asking for permission. "Mother, may I greet him a little, is that all right?" Tess gradually approached, nodding slightly in acknowledgement to everyone. After greeting, the nobles and servants each raised their heads. "It's been a long time since I met you all due to my busy schedule," his voice full of strength and decisiveness, reassuring the crowd. Tespelin approached the female lead even closer. To Yuzniel's mother, she couldn't let go of Yuzniel's hand out of fear, staring fixedly at Tespelin. Tespelin quickly approached to greet her. "Yuzniel, it's a pleasure to see you like this." That same face, black hair, gray eyes, was the ideal image for Yuzniel. Yuzniel touched the red stone on her chest and looked intently at Tespelin, not taking her eyes off him. Just as she was about to say something, Yuzniel's mother arrived and raised her hand to stop her. She whispered to Yuzniel, stand behind me, Yuzniel. Yuzniel turned around, worriedly asking, what's wrong with you since earlier? Is something wrong, mother? Her mother's face still showed unease, clearly evident. She asked in a low voice, could it be because of the Emperor's change in appearance that you're so cautious? Wherever Tespelin went, everyone's eyes immediately lit up, all full of admiration. They looked at that dark figure with admiration. At that moment, the palace seemed enveloped in darkness, with discussions about Tespelin growing. The Emperor's black hair is truly perfect. Isn't black the evidence of royal blood? Because it is such a noble color, isn't it? Yuzniel's mother witnessed all this, becoming more and more uneasy as she turned to look at the other side. The Emperor conducting such a large-scale brainwashing, what is he planning? The eyes of the few remaining people were still sober amidst the suspicion and horror. How could this be? To achieve this, the energy consumption must be extremely high. At that moment, Tespelin continued his speech. The Empire has now gone through 273 years of history. In his eloquent speech, flower petals descended from above onto the heads of everyone present. The joy that everyone was experiencing felt truly magical. Tespelin proceeded with his speech, exuding confidence as he extended his hands before the crowd, declaring, I hope that everyone will be safe and sound in the coming year. I hereby declare that the New Year festival is officially underway, and I hope everyone will enjoy this celebration. On this side, Yuzniel was also reaching out to catch and admire the falling flowers. Her delicate hands gently touched the beautiful petals as they fell continuously, disappearing as soon as they touched her hand. Yuzniel tightly clenched her hand, feeling regretful, thinking, it's like an illusion. Yuzniel immediately glanced towards Tespelin standing alone amidst the crowd, feeling as though the boy he once knew no longer existed. Now, he seemed to be devoid of any thoughts whatsoever. Afterward, Yuzniel turned away, walking towards urging his parents, let's dance a gentle dance and then head home. Throughout the party, Tespelin never took his eyes off Yuzniel, watching the silhouette of Yuzniel's family gradually walk away on the other side. Tespelin felt fortunate that today happened to be someone's birthday. Hearing these words, Yuzniel stood still for a moment, then turned back to see who had just spoken, none other than Tespelin. At this moment, he smiled at her and said, it feels wonderful. If everyone were to send birthday wishes to the beloved daughter Yuzniel of the Duke Milan's house, when Tespelin made the suggestion. Yuzniel was also surprised, the two facing each other. Tespelin continued, I hope you will receive more happiness than anyone else. Hearing this, Yuzniel was also puzzled about what to do. Before Yuzniel could finish thanking her, Yuzniel's mother quickly stepped up to pull her away. Yuzniel smiled at Tespelin, saying, so may I have the honor to dance with my father? Tespelin, standing behind, smiled gently, then quickly reached out and called, Princess Yuzniel. Tespelin confidently said, can I invite you to dance the first dance? Tespelin's words surprised Yuzniel even more when he made that request. Yuzniel stepped closer. Yuzniel was still very confused by the question just now because it wasn't, can I become your dance partner, or can I not? Yuzniel was taken aback by Tespelin's aggressive approach. However, contrary to the joy, Yuzniel's eyes were now more confused. As the invitation echoed in his ears, she continued to wonder about that invitation. Can I invite you to dance the first dance? He didn't leave any room for refusal. Unable to refuse anymore, Yuzniel realized that Tespelin was indeed very much like him. Yuzniel silently pondered what would happen to his family if he refused. If he didn't refuse the Emperor's hand, false rumors would arise. Yuzniel was in a dilemma. Slowly, she extended her hand, intending to place it on Tespelin's hand. But then a voice interrupted them, no, you can't do that. Yuzniel's father hurried over to intervene. He didn't want that to happen, so he stood in front of the girl, explaining, my daughter has already decided to dance with me today. This clumsy move left Yuzniel feeling awkward too. She stood before Tespelin and her father, apologizing, please allow my father and me to spend time together, Your Majesty. Yuzniel's mother, standing beside them, urged, let's go quickly, Yuzniel. Yuzniel's father came up with another reason, because my long-time dream has been to dance with my daughter at the masquerade ball, Your Majesty. Upon hearing this, Tespelin's expression changed. He chuckled, his eyes sharpening slightly, but, Duke, in my opinion, the first dance she should still dance with her peers, shouldn't she? The father awkwardly admitted, yes, that's right, Your Majesty. But, Your Majesty. Tespelin continued, furthermore, about the first dance after entering high society. If performed with the emperor, the princess's status will be higher. Yuzniel's mother, listening nearby, felt unhappy. Yuzniel didn't know when Tespilin had become so eloquent. Yuzniel's mother was angry but didn't show it outwardly, firmly saying, "Thank you for your words, but our daughter has promised to dance with her father from the beginning." Perhaps her mother's restraint was reaching its limit. She sounded a bit cold, hoping the Majesty would understand. Tespilin remained calm at this moment, smiling and then bursting into laughter, making Yuzniel's family suspicious. He approached Yuzniel and said, "I don't intend to trouble your family, but a decision has yet to be made. The young lady should choose directly because the person I want to dance the first dance with is her." Yuzniel felt stunned, pushed back and forth, ultimately deciding it was up to her. She closed her eyes, feeling a bit exhausted, wondering if she made the right decision, and calmly said, "So, as I promised, I will dance with my father." Yuzniel hadn't finished her sentence when she opened her eyes to see Tespilin's face closing in, almost touching hers, which startled her. The scene seemed sweet, making Yuzniel so nervous that she gripped the stone on her chest tightly. Yuzniel even thought Tespilin had kissed her in front of everyone, so she leaned back and asked, "Tespilin, what are you doing?" Tespilin saw Yuzniel wearing the red stone he had given her, very pleased, and leaned close to her ear, asking if the stone suited her. This intimate action made Yuzniel embarrassed, but Tespilin continued to ask, "Do you know about the essence of this red gemstone?" He suggested that if Yuzniel was curious about it, then she should dance the first dance with him. With Tespilin's sincerity and enthusiasm, will Yuzniel agree? Although she had decided to dance the first dance with her father, now Yuzniel was thinking about Tespilin's previous words. Wasn't she curious about the essence of this red gemstone? Tespilin made a plea to Yuzniel, "So, will you dance the first dance with me?" Tespilin eagerly reached out his hand towards Yuzniel once again, smiling and awaiting her answer. Meanwhile, Yuzniel stood opposite, bewildered by Tespilin's words. Finally, Yuzniel agreed and placed her hand on Tespilin's palm. "Then let's go, Your Majesty," Yuzniel said. Yuzniel's mother stood nearby, trying to prevent her daughter from doing so when she saw her daughter's choice. Yuzniel's parents disagreed and called her over, "Come here quickly," their haste, creating a tense atmosphere. Now Yuzniel felt even more awkward, she sighed deeply. Tespilin tightly held Yuzniel's hand, looking at her mother, asking, "Madam, have you forgotten the rule?" Tespilin moved closer to Yuzniel's mother, continuing, "No one can interfere once two people have agreed to dance together until this dance ends. Because that is an ancient rule of the Imperial Masquerade Ball." Tespilin stared at Yuzniel's mother. "Moreover, from the moment we met, I felt like Madam was acting as if I would harm Princess Yuzniel." "Madam, don't worry, I am the one who wishes for the princess's safety more than anyone else. Please rest assured, I will not lay a finger on the princess." Hearing this, Yuzniel's mother remained silent, staring at him. Tespilin continued, "Of course, if the princess wants it differently, then my words would be different too." After saying what needed to be said, Tespilin turned away, pulling Yuzniel along. "Come, let's dance," he said. In front of Mr. and Mrs. Harlan's eyes, their daughter walked hand in hand with the young man, chatting as they went. "What's wrong?" "I didn't want anything earlier," she said. Tespilin looked at the shy Yuzniel with happiness in his heart. Behind them, Mr. Milan embraced Mrs. Seal reassuringly, but she still felt worried. Of course, it was an overly unnecessary concern of parents. Because he may be dangerous, but what's important is that he's handsome. The dance began, the music resonating softly. Tespilin and Yuzniel also stepped forward, preparing to dance. The scene was romantic, but Tespilin noticed something strange. Feeling worried, he asked Yuzniel, "What's wrong with you? I've noticed that you haven't looked very happy since earlier." Yuzniel's face was now full of guilt, she said, "Actually, I've been stepping on your toes since earlier." Seeing Yuzniel's actions, Tespilin was a bit panicked, afraid that Yuzniel was angry. "And then?" Yuzniel blushed. "No, it's just that I'm clumsy, that's all." Tespilin gently asked again, "What's wrong? Are you clumsy?" After a while, he softly exclaimed, "Oh," as Tespilin now understood Yuzniel's intention. Yuzniel shyly admitted that she didn't know how to dance, her embarrassment evident in the sunlight and on her face, which intrigued Tespilin. Tespilin reassured her, saying it was okay, then gently reached out to embrace her waist, leading her along with the music. With a smile, Tespilin expressed affection for Yuzniel, lifting her up tenderly, an action that made Yuzniel feel embarrassed and scared. "What are you doing?" Tespelin enjoyed Yuzniel's embarrassment, seeing her clumsiness and dancing as nothing in his eyes. So that's it. Tespelin secretly exclaimed, "You're adorable, so it's okay to break the rules." Yuzniel noticed Tespelin's intense gaze, causing her face to blush slightly afterward. Yuzniel regained her senses and asked Tespelin, "Are you going to dance like this? Please put me down quickly. I'm afraid that if I fall, everyone will see." Tespelin's face showed a bit of guilt this time, glancing around at everyone. Then, his dark eyes gradually turned red, immediately causing flower petals to fall from above during the party, making everyone exclaim, "Wow, it's so beautiful." He once again used magic to enchant everyone. These actions made Yuzniel feel both curious and wary of Tespelin. Tespelin cheerfully asked her, "Well, are we okay now? They don't care about us anymore." Yuzniel felt even more uncomfortable and snapped, "Okay? Your Majesty, stop playing around and put me down now." Tespelin, annoyed, said, "You're really too much," full of resentment. He then released Yuzniel. Yuzniel was also annoyed. "Alright, I don't want to hear you talk anymore, and you're abusing magic too much right now. Using that much magic just to roll your eyes a bit?" Yuzniel couldn't believe her eyes. She had so many questions in her mind. Is this the first time I've seen the magic of mind erasure and temptation? Without any preparation for a spell, how could it be done? It's hard to understand. Tespelin smiled at her. "What's wrong with a little abuse? Because today is your birthday, it deserves an event like this." Even so, while dancing, Yuzniel continued to think about the people around her. Seeing this, Tespelin said, "If anyone bothers you, I will erase their contract. So don't worry, even if it takes a lot of effort, I'm doing this for you." In her astonishment, Yuzniel was gradually led into the dance by Tespelin, their gentle movements sweetening the moment. Now Tespelin just wants Yuzniel to focus on him. Tespelin tightly holds Yuzniel's hands to his chest, standing behind him, softly whispering into Yuzniel's ear, "Whatever you like, I can give it to you as a birthday present." The extremely close proximity makes Yuzniel feel Tespelin's warm breath against his neck. His breath is so warm. Yuzniel's face blushes slightly because she knows that if this continues, she will be drawn into Tespelin. Then, Yuzniel turns around seriously and asks, "If you really want to wish me a happy birthday, then quickly tell me about the essence of this red gem." The reason she insists on knowing is because Yuzniel has also tried to investigate but couldn't find out what the gem is made of, so she has always been curious about what it could be. Upon hearing the question from Yuzniel, Tespelin remains silent, looking at her for a moment. Seeing this, Yuzniel continues to ask, "Please answer me." Surprisingly, Tespelin answers in Yuzniel's astonishment, "That is my heart." Yuzniel is extremely shocked. She pushes Tespelin standing in front of her. "What? Wait, what did you just say? Is it true?" Tespelin places Yuzniel's hand on his chest, smiling. "Actually, that gem is my heart." But then, Tespelin's expression changes. He now seems to be enveloped in a dark atmosphere. Tespelin speaks to himself, "Yuzniel, do you know? The one I love the most is you." Tespelin's change makes her feel somewhat frightened. She doesn't know how terrible Tespelin's childhood memories were. When Tespelin was only 6 years old, the scene of collapse in front of him made Tespelin sit in a corner in the dark, always saying it hurts too much. Yuzniel doesn't know how much she saved Tespelin. Tespelin feels his eyes hurt a lot, which is also why Tespelin cried a lot at that time. Tespelin begins to recall his terrible childhood. "I just remember that I always had to struggle to escape, because of the pain. The whole palace was searching, but they still didn't know where I was. Have they found me yet? No, I'm not here." A group of maids rushed to find Tespelin. "Where did the prince go? Have you tried looking in the warehouse over there? He hid there last time too." "Is that so? Let's go check it out." Then, inside the dark room, they quickly found Tespelin lying unconscious on the floor. "We found him, hurry, bring Tespelin." They lifted Tespelin and kept calling, "Prince, wake up." Seeing the boy not waking up, the maid panicked, urging everyone to quickly inform the queen. Fortunately, Tespelin also woke up when he heard his name being called. But he looked very tired. Tespelin slowly opened his eyes, seeing everyone blurry. They kept calling out for the prince. "Are you awake?" But at that moment, Tespelin suddenly realized something terrifying. Then, as they kept calling out for the prince louder and louder, they quickly noticed the changes in Tespelin's body. Why does the body naturally tremble like that? Why is that? A person from the group of servants stood in front of Tespelen and called him Your Highness. But in Tespelen's eyes, the skin of the other person no longer looked normal. Instead, it had a very dark shade, much like a demon. Not only this person, but the ones behind also made Tespelen feel the same way, but the servants were unaware of it, and they just stared at Tespelen and slowly approached the boy, worried about what had happened to the prince. A hand touching Tespelen's cheek made him even more panicked. Oh my! Look at the sweat on the prince's face. That moment made Tespelen shiver violently. The servant inquired, concerned, Are you all right? Sweat streaming, Tespelen hesitated, saying no, not liking it, asking them to go elsewhere. Unable to bear it any longer, Tespelen bit the hand of the maid and then quickly ran away, causing her to cry out in pain, ouch. Everyone rushed to help the injured maid, asking if she was okay. The maid let out a cry, rubbing her hand, seeming very painful, but still enduring it. She tightly grasped the wound on her hand and looked up to assess the situation in front of her. After all, the prince acted like that again. After pushing the maid away, Tespelen sat in a corner, looking frightened, trembling, not letting anyone come near him. You go somewhere else, don't come here. Even facing everyone was difficult for Tespelen at that moment. If someone touched his body, he felt a strange and painful sensation. Those actions made the servants hesitate. After all, why are you like that? Tespelen folded himself up, using a curtain to cover his own fear. I feel so much pain because I can see people's souls. So, that dark skin was because the servants had very evil souls. Tespelen's tears kept falling. The boy felt his eyes hurt too much. Then the queen arrived where the servants found Tespelen. Tespelen also felt his mother's dark soul, ever since he was born. That's why he only dared to hold his mother's finger with 2 fingers. After grasping those hands tightly, Tespelen saw that filth spreading throughout his mind. Tespelen looked at his mother. Perhaps humans always express emotions, but on the face, there are also colors of the soul, as if it were covered by a thin layer. Tespelen kept looking at his mother, thinking silently about his actions and her current state. Maybe my mother is getting angry again. Stepping forward, Tespelen asked, Mother, are you angry with me? This question finally made the queen stop, and the 2 of them stood facing each other for a moment, only the 2 of them now. The queen placed her hand on her forehead, looking tired, and sighed deeply. I'm not angry, Crown Prince. I heard that you were hiding in the heirs class, and everyone went to look for you. You even bit one of the maids. Tell me, why did you do that? Tespelen's face remained cold but sincere in his response, because I hate humans, their souls are so greedy that it affects me. If I try to look at them, I feel like they will swallow me whole. The queen's voice lost its patience. Crown Prince, why do you keep doing this? Do you think it's right? You've used the same excuse before to change all the servants. Now you want to repeat this again? Why do you keep justifying yourself like this? Hearing his mother's words, Tespelen realized that only he could see souls. No one else could. Aware of this, Tespelen was given the nickname Crying Crown Prince. They didn't know about his special ability. Tespelen tried to explain to his mother, but because everyone has a different soul color, no one is the same. That's why my eyes hurt, Mother, do you know? Tespelen lowered his head sadly. Everything I said is true, please believe me. At this moment, after hearing everything Tespelen had just said, the queen remained silent for a while and said nothing. But after that moment, she smiled and approached Tespelen, putting her hand on his shoulder to reassure him. All right, I believe you. Just relax. If your own mother doesn't believe you, then who will? Hearing her mother's words, Tespelen's face immediately lit up with a ray of hope. He felt excited. Really? Mother, are you telling the truth? The 2 continued to look at each other, and that scene made Tespelen's mother smile gently. If you say so, then it shall be. But deep in her eyes, she had a thought. Because now, the prince was still a child, so it was natural for children to lie and throw tantrums. If he was educated and nurtured, he would grow up normal, like other children. When he grew up, he would become an outstanding heir, get married, and further the royal family's position. She didn't know that her son could feel everything, and Tespelen boldly confronted his mother's lies. His words surprised his mother, her face showing bewilderment. What are you saying? Tespelen's voice turned cold. You don't believe me at all. His face saddened again. Have you forgotten? I've seen everything you've done, Mother. you can't hide from me. Are you telling the truth or not? Tespelin could perceive and see through her soul, because you only see me as a tool, don't you, mother? Tespelin's mother was shocked. What? What did you just say? At that moment, Tespelin's displeasure was evident on his face. The queen became angry and yelled loudly, how dare you be so rude? Truly an uneducated child. After saying that, she stormed off, admonishing, from now on, absolutely do not skip the heirs classes again. Do you understand? She left Tespelin standing alone in the cold palace like that. The boy knew his mother wasn't on his side either. Time passed slowly, and the night fell. Inside the king and queen's chamber, the queen's melodious voice called for the king, who was sitting on the bed reading a book, wondering why the queen suddenly hugged him. The queen smiled shyly and said softly, shall we give the crown prince another sibling? The king, with his frail figure, worried about the future of the heir, hence his words, to comfort the queen. Why do you say that? Tespelin is still young, so don't worry too much. The queen sighed, but up until now, the little one hasn't been willing to listen to any lectures properly. Their intimate conversation continued, but they didn't realize that Tespelin, standing outside the door, heard everything. The king spoke up, if you're worried, how about helping Tespelin make a new friend? I've heard that the Duke of Harland's daughter is quite special. Tespelin silently wondered, who is the Duke of Harland? The king continued, I think if he has a compatible friend, Tespelin might open up to others more. Hearing this, Tespelin forced a cold smile and turned away. He had once thought that having a compatible friend was impossible. Tespelin left his parents' room, but his eyes still hurt. Because the palace was full of such vile souls everywhere. In his memory, he remembered always feeling bleak until he met Yusniel. The first time he felt it, Yusniel was someone very special. Since then, Tespelin had become shy, sucking his finger, avoiding everyone. Thinking about seeing the souls of people, Tespelin felt it was much more painful than just thinking about it. Seeing him so timid, the servants tried their best to coax him, using toys to approach Tespelin, smiling and comforting him, telling him not to be afraid. Here's a bunny friend. Hi, I'm Bunny. Tespelin, curious, approached. Surprised, he asked, what's this? Are you my friend? The servant smiled and replied, yes, I'm Bunny, your friend. She thought what she had just done was easy to become friends with Tespelin, because earlier, the queen had ordered all the servants, I will reward whoever can become a playmate with the crown prince. Although the queen personally issued the order and promised rewards, she was actually very afraid. Because the servants took turns taking breaks and only she was left, she expressed her decision while tidying up. They were surprised to hear her talk about trying to do that. The confident servant told everyone around her. No matter how stubborn the crown prince is, he's still a child. If successful, I could earn a lot of money, right? Hearing this, an older servant nearby asked, so, is it okay that the one who was crying and twitching is also fine? The eyes also show such horror. At this moment, Tespelin stood dumbfounded in front of the servant, with innocent eyes, asking, are you really my friend? The servant secretly thought, what was her intention just now? As she thought, indeed Tespelin was just a normal child. He quickly put on a meek smile, of course, I always stand by the prince's side, you can trust me. Hearing this, Tespelin immediately flashed a cold smile. The unfortunate servant had fallen into a trap. Tespelin looked at him and said firmly, you're lying. Surprised, he asked, what are you lying about now? Then Tespelin's eyes gleamed with a sharp light, because I can see through everything. Hearing this, the servant trembled all over. She felt extremely cold, because of Tespelin's gaze at that moment. She quickly apologized, I will leave now, and she hurriedly ran out. Alone, Tespelin stood there, dropping the little rabbit on the ground. What's this? Tespelin still didn't understand. Didn't she just say she stood by me? Tespelin bent down to pick up the rabbit, holding it close, feeling a bit disappointed, and said tiredly. Really? Tespelin then ran to the palace, sitting on the lap of his father. At this point, the boy refused to meet anyone other than his family, but the king always tried to make new friends for him. Now, the emperor had instructed, when you meet Miss Harland, remember not to behave rudely. Tess sat quietly, feeling sad. The king continued, that family is noble, so befriending them will benefit you in the future. Before that, I heard that the girl has some similarities with you, so get along with her. Hearing this, Tespelin thought, similarities? Tespelin had heard people talking to each other. They said the Harland girl had never cried since she was born. Oh, how scary it sounds. Some people cry, while others never shed a tear. While hiding in a corner of the palace, Tespelin heard everything the servant had just said. They talked like that to each other. Tespelin sat in a corner, thinking about the Hardlard family, like the words just now. Tespelin didn't care much, because he believed that people were all deceitful. When the king said, Tess replied, "Can't I go back to my room? If I meet someone else, my eyes will hurt again, your majesty." Of course, the king seemed angry, saying, "Although I have overlooked your stubbornness in the past, don't worry the queen anymore." Hearing this, Tespelin felt disappointed, wondering, am I stubborn? What am I expecting? But the king asked again, "Tespelin, answer quickly, okay?" Tespelin remained silent. He knew from the beginning that the old man didn't care about his son, but he still had to pretend to be a good child. Tespelin laughed foolishly. "Yes, your majesty." The emperor laughed, stroked Tespelin's head, saying, "That's right, that's my cute son." The recent head patting made Tespelin smile, but in his heart, he felt bored. The palace was always full of people guarding around, but he felt they were all selfish and deceitful. Tespelin passed by a family portrait and looked at it. My mother only thought of her own goals. But my father loved only her. Tespelin held the rabbit's hand, feeling his eyes hurting. Because Tespelin could see souls, Tespelin felt surrounded by darkness. Because seeing souls made him disgusted with everything. At this moment, the door opened, a call from the servant rang out, "Your Majesty, Duke Hardlard is entering." This call made Tespelin also startled to look, his face suddenly brightened. Tespelin was surprised, Usniel, for the first time. Tespelin looked at Usniel, thinking that Usniel truly shone. When Usniel stepped in, because Usniel seemed to bring a ray of hope to Tespelin. This was the first meeting between Tespelin and Usniel, and since that day, Tespelin never left Usniel. Tespelin always followed Usniel, knowing that he was bothering Usniel, but there was no other way, because before, Tespelin's world was only full of pain, but when Usniel appeared, Tespelin felt that only Usniel was his light. Usniel reached out for Tespelin to hold and pulled him into endless darkness, where only Usniel considered Tespelin a friend, not a prince. When Usniel saw him bleeding from his nose, he shouted, "Tespelin." Usniel quickly ran over to care for Tespelin when Tespelin said he was fine. "Are you okay?" "Don't tilt your head up," Usniel said, covering Tespelin's nose, with a worried tone. "So, your body often hurts too?" Hearing this, Tespelin thought to himself, even nobles, who get sick. Seeing him hesitate, Usniel shouted, "You fool. I told you not to tilt your head up." Usniel worried about Tespelin, advising, "I'll apply acupressure, let me know if it hurts." Tess doubted, "What? Why?" Tess didn't understand, but if Usniel said so, he would do it. Tespelin thought he would have more time together and enjoy various sweets. That was what Usniel would like, that suited Usniel. Usniel said he wanted to read this book, a book about magic. For a moment, Tespelin's world was filled with Usniel's figure. While Usniel read, Tespelin sat next to him watching his reading posture, and then, Tespelin suddenly realized he liked Usniel. Before, Tespelin had thought that if he made an effort, they could share the same feeling, but going back to childhood, Usniel had firmly said that Tess was not his type. When he heard Usniel's ideal model, Tess collapsed. Perhaps everything started from there, black hair and black eyes. At that moment, Tespelin had thought about how to change his appearance. That was a worry in Tespelin's heart. Tespelin realized that Usniel was very different from other girls his age. A noble gathering? "I don't like it," she said. "If noticed, it's annoying." Just like that, the boy understood what Usniel liked and disliked. She only cared about studying. Occasionally, she said things that he couldn't understand, like asking the professor about flying to another world, making the professor shake his head solemnly. "Unfortunately, I don't know either." Sitting beside him, you could feel every time like that, she looked very disappointed, which also made you feel extremely heartbroken. And since then, he had determined that everything Usniel wanted him to do would become a reality. The reason for this was very simple, because he liked Usniel. Usniel was very gentle. When he was young, when Usniel was concentrating on reading, Tespelin sat next to him, feeling bored, asking her, "Can you play with me a little?" Tespelin knew that she hated annoying things, but still always followed his pleas obediently. Indeed, Usniel stopped reading and turned to smile at him, "Sure. You read this book, I'll wait for you, she said, stroking Tespalin's head. Tespalin was very excited to nod at this, but Yuzniel quickly noticed the red corners of Tespalin's eyes. Wait, your eyes are red, are they hurting? Tespalin felt very warm, she was always very sensitive to my pain, her voice with a very worried look, all very gentle. Tespalin didn't want Yuzniel to worry, so he smiled foolishly, saying, it's okay, meeting Yuzniel makes me not feel pain anymore. Oh, Yuzniel, couldn't resist, continued to stroke Tespalin's head, the timid boy was now more courageous. I heard you've been studying hard lately? Tespalin thought to himself, because she said she liked mature people, and for him at that time everything was great. How is it different from any other day now? Tespalin is still lingering beside Yuzniel, while she sits reading. Tespalin couldn't help but cover his mouth to yawn, seeing that, Yuzniel glanced and asked him, didn't you sleep well yesterday? Tespalin lazily nodded his head once. He remembered the situation last night. It turns out inside the palace, the maids changed, strange and ugly souls kept appearing, making him startled. While he was thinking about that scene, a hand reached out to pull him over, making him snap back to the present. Yuzniel was like a kind mother speaking to her little child. Lean on me a bit, when you finish reading this book, I'll wake you up, she said while pulling Tespalin's head to rest on her shoulder. She didn't know she was a child she cared for like a younger brother, now she was so embarrassed that her ears turned red. Tespalin greatly enjoyed that comfortable feeling, he leaned his head on her shoulder, closing his eyes under this warm morning sun, the gentle breeze outside blowing through the window frame, making the atmosphere in the room very pleasant. Tespalin, with his eyes gradually closing, felt warm at this moment. When he opened his eyes, he could see the girl he liked reading attentively in front of him. Tespalin silently called her name, Yuzniel, my gentle one. He slowly closed his eyes. There was a wish that if this moment could last forever, it would be wonderful. I want to give you my love, I want us to be together for the rest of our lives, without parting for any other reason. Tespalin and his imagined image began to shatter. He realized that if he couldn't meet the standard of black hair along with black hair that Yuzniel liked, what would he do? The warm morning passed as usual for Tespalin, who returned to his dim, gloomy room after playing around. Standing alone in the dimly lit room, Tespalin pondered about Yuzniel. He couldn't help but nervously nibble on his small fingers, murmuring with unease. At just 6 years old, Tespalin was already contemplating something significant. What if Yuzniel liked someone else in the future? Given his perfect personality, appearance, and outstanding achievements, there were surely many people around Yuzniel paying attention to him. If one day someone among them could be with her, then I would surely be abandoned. Feeling melancholic, Tespalin remembered the ideal appearance that Yuzniel had mentioned to him before. The young boy's subdued voice admitted he couldn't change his appearance just through his own efforts. He thought it would have been easier if Yuzniel had used him like others. If so, then I would become an emperor just to be with her. Tespalin sat in a corner, worried, determined to change his appearance. As long as he could be with her, he would give up everything. While he was anxious, unaware that a dark light was plotting against him, a mesmerizing darkness asked Tespalin if he wished for that girl. That entity spoke to him, offering help. It made a mysterious plea, saying, you just need to accept me. Tespalin, curious, asked the figure before him, who are you? At that moment, Tespalin felt strange. The figure extended its bony hands, speaking in a grave tone, I am a forgotten deity. If you make a pact with me, I will fulfill your wishes. Tespalin was somewhat wary, asking, what wish? The figure, understanding him, smiled and replied, your wish could be to become the emperor of this land, or to spend your life immersed in wealth and precious gems, or to make the girl you like fall in love with you. Hearing this, Tespalin immediately recalled a figure that had invaded his mind, becoming number one in his heart. That was also the wish he desperately wanted. But Tespalin quickly regained his senses. He loved Yuzniel, so he also understood her character. He berated himself for not being able to force her to love him. The entity didn't want that, having never trusted that person from the beginning. Seeing Tespalin's cold expression, the entity was somewhat disappointed, asking again, is there anything wrong, Tespalin? The boy was startled, feeling extremely frightened. How could he read his thoughts? The entity then coldly chuckled, offering a small gift to Tespalin, something he surely desired. Turning away, the entity left Tespalin in utter confusion. His nose started to bleed slowly, but Tespalin still had no idea what was about to happen to him. What were those demonic things talking about? Finally, Tess realized why he had started growing so rapidly that day and why he had continued to grow with unease in his heart. Eventually, a series of events unfolded at that day's party that left him extremely heartbroken. Everything happened just as he had said. For some reason, Yuzniel began to behave like a stranger to him. That made him more desperate than ever. However, he quickly noticed her holding hands, intimately concerned about someone else, not him. Yuzniel furrowed his brow and asked, "Isn't that just ordinary maturity?" Arthur hesitated, unable to discern the changing colors of Arthur's soul, which Tespelin could instantly detect that he liked Yuzniel more. That pleasing appearance wasn't the taste Yuzniel had mentioned to me before, was it? Tespelin wondered silently, would she keep her distance from me and be with him? I don't want that, I don't want to lose her. Tespelin, oh, I don't want to. In his utter despair, that other shadowy figure appeared, patting him on the back. Still with that hauntingly captivating voice, if you make a deal with me, everything will be resolved, because your unease and fear that Yuzniel will like someone else are growing immensely. Tespelin was determined to seek the help of that shadowy figure, even though he knew it wouldn't be good to rely on it. The shadowy figure began to tell Tespelin about an ancient story, a tale he had never heard before, about a story passed down from generation to generation among the emperors, a god who made a pact with the first emperor of the Northern Empire. In fact, it was a demon disguised as a god. The emperor knew at the time that it was a demon but still accepted the deal, which allowed him to gain great magical power and knowledge. The ancient story said that he had stabilized the difficult situation of the country and built the Northern Empire. Tespelin finished reading and then burst into tears, not wanting that. He hugged the letter to his chest, only able to helplessly tell himself, Yuzniel, I'm sorry. The shadowy figure behind him patted his shoulder, urging Tespelin, if you want to get what you want, you have to try, because if you just fulfill the deal, I will solve everything for you. The eyes of the shadowy figure were now incredibly sinister, the deal had been decided. Finally, after thinking about his own problem, the emperor returned to reality. Tespelin regretted his decision, saying in a low voice, if he had known it would take so long to meet Yuzniel again, he wouldn't have signed that damn contract. Yuzniel, suspicious, stood in the middle of the room, asking Tespelin, what did you say just now? The music was too loud, so I didn't hear it. Tespelin remained silent, smiling, looking at him, not wanting to hear about the mistakes he had made in the past. He gently wrapped his arms around Yuzniel's slender waist, solemnly replying, it's nothing. Then, taking advantage of Yuzniel's unguarded state, Tespelin leaned in closer to him, like a romantic movie star. Once again, Tespelin whispered to Yuzniel, I just said I miss you so much, Yuzniel. At that moment, he kept calling her name. My Yuzniel. In that awkward situation, Yuzniel's legs trembled slightly, and she called out to Tespelin, wait, Yuzniel, what's going on? Then she heard Tespelin's answer. Have you ever heard about me changing my appearance to the point where my body was almost damaged? When I gained another little brother, many people wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to kill me. They wanted to remove me from the position of crown prince. When I was 12 years old, their plan almost succeeded, and I was still under the control of the nobles until I officially became emperor. They always said that I had to punish your family. And they also opposed the restoration of the capital. At that time I was very angry. When I became emperor, I didn't expose their weaknesses and crimes. Yuzniel, now realizing. She had her answers to her long-standing questions. So that's why you disbanded the nobility alliance and constantly punished the nobles. Tespelin quickly nodded, confirming her suspicions. Indeed, they intended to corrupt before intending to kill me. Surprisingly, while talking to Yuzniel, the demon suddenly appeared behind Tespelin, mocking him, is that statement sincere? Feeling restrained and uneasy, right? What about the stroke of luck to survive, huh? Don't lie like that, you were never that weak. To be precise, you should say you relied entirely on me, right? The demon continued to mutter, circling around Tespelin, making the boy tense to the point of clenching his fists tightly. Suddenly, a familiar voice called Tespelin's name, making him realize that he was in front of Yuzniel. Seeing Tespelin's discomfort, Yuzniel worriedly asked him, why are you so jittery? Are you feeling unwell? Tespelin quickly realized his recent rudeness, he reflexively stepped back, apologizing to her. This only made Yuzniel more worried. Seeing Tespelin's demonic reaction still lingering, she was greatly intrigued. Leaning close to Tespelin's ear, she asked, is it about that girl? The demon coiled around Tespelin, sinisterly asking, "My Yuzniel, isn't she?" "Indeed, a beautiful girl." Yuzniel was still bewildered, not understanding why Tespelin suddenly recoiled like that. Concerned, she drew nearer to him, placing her hand on his chest, asking, "You don't look too good. Are you okay?" At this moment, the demon continued targeting Yuzniel, threatening Tespelin that if he remained indifferent like this, she would be taken away. Therefore, he quickly seized her hand placed on his chest, full of fear. Yuzniel, somewhat suspicious, called his name Tespelin. Not stopping there, the demon became even more insidious, whispering to Tespelin, "Make her yours." A slightly flushed image appeared in his mind, but Tespelin immediately snapped out of it, not letting the dark entity manipulate him any longer. Tespelin hastily raised his voice, shouting, "Stop it!" Seeing Tespelin quickly regain his composure, the demon failed to achieve its purpose. It snorted coldly and quickly left. The one who didn't know what was happening was Yuzniel. She was extremely worried at this moment, calling out to Tespelin. The scream startled her a bit, prompting her to ask him, "Why did you startle me? What's wrong with you?" Tespelin, now feeling embarrassed, covered his mouth, avoiding Yuzniel's gaze. "I'm sorry, I suddenly got a headache." "What? Are you having a headache?" She became increasingly concerned. The musician on the other side, hearing the scream, was also puzzled, unsure if the Emperor had ordered them to stop or not. Hearing Tespelin's cry, Yuzniel worriedly placed her hand on his forehead to see if his body temperature was abnormal. She gently said, "Let me see, your face has turned dark. Are you okay?" Yuzniel didn't know that her caring actions had stirred Tespelin, awakening the demon he had just suppressed. Tespelin immediately remembered the demon's words earlier, "Make her yours. Make her yours forever. You will no longer feel anxious, fearing that the one you love will be taken away." Unable to resist, Tespelin slowly approached Yuzniel. In fact, that had been his long-standing wish. Once again, a voice called his name, Tespelin. It was only then that he snapped out of his trance, with Yuzniel extremely worried about his distracted state. She sternly asked, "What's been going on with you since earlier?" Again, pretending nothing was wrong, he waved his hand and said, "It's nothing." Tess cursed inwardly, "Damn it." Aware that his current state was not good, Tespelin avoided further worry and suspicion from Yuzniel. He quickly said to her, "I have a terrible headache, so I should go first." Yuzniel was extremely alarmed. "What's wrong all of a sudden?" Unlike usual, Tespelin seemed to pretend not to hear Yuzniel's words and turned away, ignoring his calls from behind. Yuzniel looked extremely puzzled. "What's going on? Why is he acting so strangely today?" She continued to worry as she watched Tespelin walk away. On the other side, Duke Harland and his wife quickly appeared before their daughter. The Duke looked at her with concern and asked, "I heard a loud noise. What's going on?" Yuzniel honestly replied, "It seems like Her Highness isn't feeling well." She still worried about that, considering Tespelin's recent condition. Not knowing if he was okay being alone like that with his current state. At this moment, Tespelin was anxiously heading to a dark place in the palace. He could finally breathe a sigh of relief now, remembering the danger just now, muttering softly, "That was really dangerous this time."